it made them look like right-wing Republicans. They all ran out and got vaccinated. Which is kind of a funny motivator, but
well, whatever it takes.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Yeah, so.
Okay, well, why don't we start, since I don't know when people will be watching it. I'm not going to put a lot of announcements out there, except that we are having welcome to the October program of the North Dallas, Texas Democratic Women. And our next in-person meeting will be on December 3rd, when Senator Nathan Johnson, who I'm sure will be reelected, will attend the holiday party and present a resolution to the North Texas Dallas Democratic Women for 20 years of service.
North Dallas, Texas Democratic Women.
I thought that's what I said.
No, you reversed it a little bit. That's okay.
So anyway,
most people can't get it out.
North Dallas, Texas, NDTDW.
Yes.
There you go.
And also, folks, if you're listening to this, you've probably received our renewal letter, and we hope that you will renew. We have some exciting things going on, which we put in the letter, and we're looking forward to a big 2023. So hopefully we'll see you then. So let me introduce our speaker, Terri Burke. Terri spent the first half of her working career as a journalist and more than a decade as the executive director of the ACLU of Texas, which is where I met her. And Terri is now the executive director of the Immunization Partnership, which is a fascinating organization that she's going to tell us about today. Terri started out as a political reporter in Connecticut and then rose to senior newsroom roles at the Hartford Current, the Dallas Morning News, the Austin American Statesman, and Albuquerque Tribune. She ended her career as editor of the Abilene, Texas Reporter News. She successfully led the nonpartisan ACLU of Texas to focus its advocacy work on policy change around voting rights, immigration rights, criminal law reform, LGBT equality, and reproductive rights. She's held a number of positions, but now she is focusing on vaccinations and immunizations, as you just heard, which surprised her. She is a native Houstonian where she lives now, and she and her husband are the parents of 2 daughters and have one practically perfect grandchild. Immunized.
She is.
Is one of your daughters still here in Dallas, Terri?
Yes, our older daughter's still in Dallas. In fact, she's coming to Houston tomorrow. My mother lives here, and her 92nd birthday is this weekend. So kids are coming in for the birthday party. So, yeah.
Well, you've spoken to NDTDW and TDW when
Yes.
executive director of the Texas ACLU, and done a great job. And we're so happy to have you back again and inform us about vaccinations and immunizations. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate the invitation, and it's so nice to reconnect with you, Carol, after all these last few years at least. Yeah, so excuse me, let me tell you a little bit about the Immunization Partnership. We call it TIP for short. It's a 15-year-old organization headquartered in Houston that works statewide. We like to say we're the voice for Texans who want to prevent disease. We historically have worked within the healthcare community, and we have educated and we have advocated for good public health policy. If you ask someone in the healthcare arena about us, they know who we are, and we're highly respected because of the expertise of our staff and the expertise of our board and our scientific advisory council, and all the people who have come together over the years to work on these issues. Coming out of COVID, we realized that it's a much bigger issue than we really had previously dealt with. And there is no organization in the state of Texas that is advocating for immunizations at the community level. And notice I didn't say grassroots. I just mean at the community level, over the backyard fence with your neighbors. You know, it's really about that folks who are opposed to vaccinations tend to be, as happens with so many issues, a minority, but very loud. And so we're rebooting our work going forward. And I mean, as I say, we've always worked with state lawmakers to create and protect public policy to increase immunization rates. But now we intend to leverage that knowledge and expertise to be not only the effective voice of the legislature, but to show others how they can use their voices as well. But I'm going to step back just a little bit, because I think when we, unfortunately or fortunately, when we hear vaccinations, everybody goes right to COVID. And yes, we care about that. But as I say, we've been around since before COVID. In fact, vaccines have been around for more than 100 years. And I want to explain why we think vaccine policy is so necessary. It's a guardrail for public health. It prevents the spread of infectious diseases. You improve access to vaccines and immunization coverage rates. People are healthier. They're protected from preventable diseases. Vaccines were once declared one of the 10 greatest public health achievements ever. And it's a really cheap way to stay healthy, by the way. But there are these groups that are working to undermine our vaccine laws and policies by weakening and dismantling the public health structure, infrastructure. And so all of that rhetoric that's occurred around the COVID vaccine has bled over into all immunizations. They have become, the folks who are anti-vax have become more vocal, they've become more energized, and now they're going after all vaccines, but most particularly childhood vaccines. And those are the ones with the greatest track record of all. I like to point out that there are at least 2 adult generations who have never seen the likes of smallpox or polio or any of those just horrible diseases that some of us are old enough to remember having happened. And so there's folks who don't know what it's like to hear a child with whooping cough who's gasping for air. And that can be prevented with a vaccine. So, but let me say, the anti-vax movement isn't new. It started in the 1800s, though it really ramped up in the last 50 years. And it started in the 1980s with concern around neurologic outcomes for DPT vaccines, diphtheria, polio, tetanus vaccines. And a documentary came out called DPT, the Vaccine Roulette. And lawsuits followed and all sorts of stuff happened. Then in 1998, a guy named Andrew Wakefield published a study of 12 children which purported to find a link between the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and autism. And that study was later found to be fraudulent. It was redacted. But of course, the ship had sailed. And then we had celebrities on Oprah talking about their children had autism because of the MMR vaccine and so on and so on. Wakefield lost his medical license in the UK, but I know you'll be thrilled to know he lives in Austin, Texas now. Which is part of why the anti-vaccine movement is centered in Texas. And I like to say that the future of the nation runs through Texas, and this proves it once again. So this all has been going on for a while. Then in 2015, there was a measles outbreak at Disneyland, and California removed non-medical exemptions for school entry. The only way you could not be vaccinated in California was if you had a medical exemption. So a group got together in Texas and said, gee, we need that same law. We need to pass that because we had added non-medical exemptions in 2003. So this group gets together, they going to do it. They formed a group to make it happen, when all of a sudden this very vocal political action committee cropped up called Texans for Vaccine Choice. Now, in this case, you should all be proud because it's located in Keller. It's headquartered in Keller. It's very near you. You can go visit their offices, I'm sure. So whereas prior vaccine skeptics were talking about toxins in vaccines, this group started to couch it in terms like parental rights and, near and dear to my heart, individual liberties. And these became really effective terms with the legislature. So when I talk about anti-vaccine people, who do I mean? A lot of research has gone into this, and they are principally people who are anti-government. They are people who practice alternative medicine, right-to-lifers to some extent, big parental rights supporters, and then folks who are relying on the arguments around liberty and medical rights. They are very well funded. They like to position themselves as the underdog, like they're just parents fighting against big pharma. But that's really not true. They have money coming in from individual donors, and also a lot of money from the supplement and natural remedy industry. But Texans for Vaccine Choice has a budget of probably 3 to 4 million, which candidly is more than ours. And they even have doctors and nurses who are members of that organization. There's the Children's Health Defense Fund, which Robert F. Kennedy Jr. started, and his was born out of this autism business a number of years ago. And then there's the ICAN, which is the Informed Consent Action Network. It's led by a guy named Del Bigtree. He's a radio host of some note, and he also lives in Austin. The ICAN had a 60% increase in revenue during the first year of the pandemic. ICAN has 50,000 Facebook followers, which for a nonprofit is huge. I mean, most of us don't get that close. They have some real themes in their legislative agenda. They want to redefine and mandate informed consent discussions. They want to penalize physicians who dismiss unvaccinated patients. And they want to eliminate all vaccine mandates. If they can't do that, they want to at least make school mandate exemptions super easy to get. And then finally, they want to declare the unvaccinated as a legal protected class.
Oh.
It's my favorite. But let me start with the exemptions and the mandates, because I have been stunned by those numbers. So you don't have to get your kid vaccinated to go to school. If there's a medical indication. And let me just say, whether it's COVID or polio vaccine, or MMR, we always say, talk to your trusted medical professional who knows your health story best and can give you the best advice. I'm not sitting here, as you well know, I have no public health background or medical background. I'm not sitting here saying everybody has to be vaccinated, but everybody who possibly can be vaccinated ought to, but do it in concert with your medical professional that you see and trust. But they, so that's an allowable exception. And then they added reasons of conscience, including religious beliefs. So to claim this exemption, a parent or guardian or an 18-year-old student just has to sign a form, get it notarized, say I have a conscientious objection, and I'm just not going to do this. And so so what they would really like to do, though, is remove all vaccine mandates. So they don't really even have to worry about these exemptions. They just, let us have a resurgence of polio and smallpox and whatever else comes along. To give you some sense of this, last year we have 4 million school children in Texas. 86,000 kindergartners had conscientious exemptions. You can tell what area I'm from when I say objection. So 86,000 had exemptions last year. And to give you a sense of where this is the most serious, I looked at your region. And there are 7 counties in your area with non-medical exemption rates greater than 3% of the student population. It's Collin, Denton, Hood, Parker, Rockwall, Somerville, and Wise. So a little farther, some of them farther west of North Dallas. But and those numbers have been growing. They're not coming down, they're going up. So we're talking about children being unvaccinated, but the eventual consequence is communities vulnerable to outbreaks of preventable diseases. So here's what we've seen and here's what we think's coming. In 2021, our pandemic legislative session, as you probably know, there were 230 days of it instead of the normal 140. Molly Ivins used to say if they only met every 140 years for 2 days, we'd be so much safer. That was really true in 2021. There were more than 100 vaccine-related bills filed in that session. More than 60% of them were anti-vaccination. 25% of them had the word discrimination in their bill titles. And there was the worst, of course, was that there was this huge presence of vaccine opposers at the Capitol. Legislators were absolutely convinced that Texans didn't want vaccines. So the goal this session is not just to make the exemption procedure easier. Texans for Vaccine Choice sent out a fundraising email last week that had a line in it that says, "We are wholly and completely against all vaccine mandates. Texans should call the shots," it read. In other words, the goal is to get rid of all vaccine mandates entirely. So you don't have to worry about getting an exemption. You just send your kid to school without any shots. And then the rest of the community needs to stay inside and never come out. And I mentioned the protected class earlier. It really is the most ridiculous, and it is my favorite, but it's the scariest tactic that they have. They want to include unvaccinated people as a legally protected class. Now, I know there are a couple of lawyers on this call, so you don't need a reminder, but protection includes employment, education, access to public amenities. And the protected classes are based on sex, gender, race, religion, national origin, age, disability, genetic information. They're based on what I've been told by lawyers is enduring characteristics. So if we add unvaccinated to this list, it will end any vaccination requirement for anything under any circumstance, anywhere and everywhere. So, as I said earlier, my fear is, unless November 8th turns out very differently, is that the 2023 session is going to look a lot worse on a lot of fronts. And when it comes to vaccines, what we see is legislation filed in 2021. It's very easy to refile. So those 60 plus bills could easily become 100 plus unique pieces of bad legislation. The newly elected and returning legislators are even more radicalized on vaccines now. And the anti-vax misinformation of the pandemic has already caused this drop in school vaccination rates. I mentioned the exemption rates. I was looking at some counties in East Texas today where as many as 10% of the school-age children are unvaccinated, meaning they don't just have medical exemptions or conscientious exemptions, they're just going to school unvaccinated. And as you know, school districts get money based on attendance. So I've actually had some school superintendents tell me they don't want to take on those parents because they don't want to lose the money they get from fannies and seats. So educators aren't asking the legislature to help them. So coming back to the Immunization Partnership, we're on a campaign to enlist vaccine champions in 5 key regions of the state. And frankly, we're not looking at the mega metros. There's lots of good work going on in Houston and Dallas and Fort Worth, around there, those kinds of cities. Where we want to focus our attention are on regions where there are cities with 100,000 or more surrounded by rural communities and where influential legislators live. They need to hear, I've said this, whether it was voting rights or whether it was abortion, those legislators need to hear from their constituents at the coffee shop on the town square, when they're home just they're running their insurance business. And so we need vaccine champions in those places so they can talk to their legislators and they can talk to their neighbors. And we're doing this, we're working with houses of worship, we're getting clergy members who want to join us. We're getting Rotarians, as I like to point out, PTA leaders. And as I say, it's really about being able to just inspire people like us who know that this makes sense to speak up. Because we have done polling and we know that people like us are still the majority. But you wouldn't know it from going to the Capitol. So we're asking folks to show up and be as loud as the other guys so we can match them and then double down. So that's what we're doing. And that's why.
So is it going to take a big outbreak of one of these horrible diseases to get people to understand what's going on?
You know, I mean, I hope not, but I'll tell you, we were talking about this just the other day about, I don't know if you've seen, in Houston, we're having a huge surge of RSV, which is a respiratory illness that is usually seen in toddlers and infants. Though I learned it's particularly dangerous to older people too. There is no vaccine for it, although there's one in the pipeline. But yeah, and people are really scared about RSV. I have had a lot of young parents say this. You know, I didn't even know what it was. I'd never heard of it. And I've had younger parents bringing it up to me. And so there's a part of me that says, you know, they're looking at me and saying, well, where's the vaccine for RSV? So there's some appreciation that with a vaccine, you can prevent some of these things. So I don't know. I mean, we saw the polio case in New York. I think there are more cases now. It's not a outbreak, but people in New York are very scared about it. The communities where it has happened have tended to be Orthodox Jewish communities where people live multi-generationally. So it's very frightening about what could happen at all those levels of a family, of the generations of a family. So, you know, I don't know what it's going to take.
Well, what is the anti-vaxxers' answer to, like, I have a friend whose son has childhood leukemia. He can't get vaccinated against some things while he's being treated.
Right.
She's scared to send him to school if other kids aren't vaccinated.
Right.
And
they don't have an answer for that.
They don't care.
They don't care. I mean, they sort of don't care. It's a parent's right not to send their kid to school, just as it's a parent's right not to vaccinate their kid.
But I mean, you know, he's been isolated in a hospital. He desperately wants social interaction.
Of course he does.
Interaction for him. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I find it crazy.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's exactly the point. And it is this notion that, you know, my individual liberty trumps your liberties. And you know, there's a historic court case, Jacobson v. Massachusetts, that was rendered in 1905, that has been relied on in recent in the last couple of years. It's come up a couple of times. And you know, as I said, I'd never heard of it. And, you know, I used to hang out with a lot of constitutional lawyers, but it essentially, I mean, the primary finding of Jacobson was that a state can impose a compulsory vaccination law, because individual liberty does not allow people to take actions without thinking about the harm it would cause others, without, you know, but the anti-vaxxers don't buy that. And they really, I think they want to see it. They want to see Jacobson overturned, which, you know, who knows, maybe that could happen, but it really is an interesting argument about individual liberty to me.
I have a question about the reporting apparatus at school. So if I know that, you know, 5% of my school district is unvaccinated, I don't know if that's in just a public report. How about on the individual campuses? Because I think if I want to protect my kid, I want to know what ABC elementary school vaccination rates are.
So you can look those up. I have it on my computer. Just name a school and I'll tell you. You can look those up at the DSH's website, the Department of State Health Services website. You can see not this school year, but you can see last school year by school. And what we introduced a bill in the 2021 legislature that did not pass. We want the schools to post that information at the school, at the campus. And there was an argument that somehow that violated somebody's privacy. Well, you know, we're not asking you which kids, we're only saying how many. And we're going to come back at that again. But yes, you can look up last year's rates on a website. I'll give you an interesting tidbit on that, because I've spent a lot of time studying that. Austin, Travis County, has the highest non-medical exemption rate in the state, and it is largely because of private schools. And one of those private schools, I will tell you, is a place where some very prominent left-wing people send their children. And I mean, the exemption rate is 37%.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I did find that out when I was campaigning.
Yeah.
That, you know, I wasn't expecting people that would normally support our party
Yeah, right.
to be in that camp. But that was like one non-negotiable issue for some people.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's I was talking to somebody today in East Texas who said, you know, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I don't want to be political. This isn't a political statement. He said, I just believe that if you believe in a right to life, you believe in a right to live.
Wow.
And, you know, that's kind of what this comes down to. And it really is beyond everything else. I mean, one of the things I've learned is it's really about good health. If we are vaccinated when we can be, again, I hear you about your friend's child, Carol. I mean, sadly, it's not unusual. But if you can be vaccinated, it gives you a leg up on good health. And then we don't have to talk about health care, you know, which is
all in favor of vaccination. She just can't get that one kid vaccinated. And that's the fact that other people are choosing not to vaccinate their kids and endangering hers.
Her child. Yeah, right. Exactly. And you know, the other thing I will tell you, the other thing I tell people, and especially now, is, you know, I mean, I'm so grateful. I have a wonderful granddaughter. I'm grateful I don't have little kids in my life right now, because I would be scared to death. I mean, I'm still scared for her. But you know, a parent gets up every morning and sends their child to school these days, and they don't know if that kid's going to get bullied. They don't know if that child is going to be made to feel a loner and be ostracized in some way that leads to mental health problems and suicide, for God's sakes. They don't know if somebody with a gun is going to come into the school. Yeah, all the things parents are worried about keeping their children safe. Vaccination is the easiest thing they can do. You know, it's the one thing they don't have to play whack-a-mole with. They just do it. And it's really stunning that we're hearing these arguments. And it is, you know, people keep asking, well, who's the money behind it? And it's, you know, it's individuals. It's, as I mentioned, the supplemental medicine crowd. But I don't know, you know, who else is out there doing this.
By the way, NPR had a program on this morning about the RSV surge and hitting, you know, this year early, and at the same time as flu, and the same time as they're expecting a COVID surge and whatever.
Right.
Which is why that pricked my ear since I just heard it this morning. So.
Well, I mean, and you know, the thing is, the other thing to think about, and I keep saying every reporter I talk to, I mention this to, is that, as you know, we've got a real shortage of healthcare personnel. And I mean, here in Houston, I have somebody on my board who's a big deal with one of the hospitals, big healthcare company that owns hospitals. She was telling me that they've got an entire wing of a hospital closed because they can't staff it.
Mm.
So we get this tridemic of RSV and COVID and the flu, and we have these hospitals that can't handle it. I don't know what we do. You know? I mean, you remember those pictures from New York in the early days of the pandemic? I sort of had that same vision all over again. And the RSV is really serious with these little kiddos, and they're filling up the hospitals.
Yeah, I saw on Facebook a Republican said, "Are you better off than you were 2 years ago?" And a Democrat replied, "Well, at least there aren't freezer trucks with bodies in New York City."
Yeah, I mean, at least, you know. But again, if we have all of this hit at once, that could happen. You know,
Makes me worry about our holiday gatherings with our, you know, all of our families.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, so I get your flu shot, get that COVID. I got my bivalent booster Saturday, and I admit I had a reaction. Knocked me down for the count, but they say that's a good sign. So I'm believing it. I'm just believing it, you know. So
Yeah, well, I got my flu and my COVID at the same time, 2 different arms. So.
oh great, yeah. So I did space them out. Didn't do me good, but yeah.
Well, you know, I've had all my boosters and I haven't gotten COVID, and so I am just so thankful.
Yeah.
And you know, we have elder care issues. I mean, you have a 90-year-old.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to be careful and keep up with everything, but flu shots.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, no, my mother hasn't had the flu. Hasn't had COVID or the flu, but you know, she's pretty well stayed in. I mean, she's well vaccinated, and we've just kept her inside, and we haven't had it either. But Dr. Peter Hotez, you'll probably have seen him on TV with these little bow ties. Peter's on our scientific advisory council, and he got COVID back in July, and I was talking to him and said, you know, oh my God, this is scary if you get it. And he said, well, just don't go to an indoor conference.
Well, let me ask you this: what can our members do that can help your initiative? You talked about you need these ambassadors or whatever you call them.
Yeah. So we're going to launch this program with vaccine champions, and we are focusing, frankly, one of the areas we're focusing on is sort of, I call it Northeast Texas, and then south through all of East Texas. lot of not a Dallas County, but the counties to the east there. So we'd like connection. I mean, I'm not going to go out and enroll 1,000 volunteers, but if we can get connected to local organizations with volunteers, and we will have staff train folks how to talk about vaccines, what to listen for. One of the things that I've discovered people have missed is the law in Texas requires every school district to have a school health advisory council. And a lot of places don't have it. Usually where they have thrived is in places where people wanted to block sex ed classes. So they all run around and join the shack to do that. But now some people like us are beginning to say, hey, I want to have a shack in my school district and I want to be a member of it and I'm going to bring all my friends and, but that sort of thing. And we can train people how to do that. But we really need the connections. We need that community-based connection to groups. PTAs, I think PTAs are a great opportunity for us. As I say, we're trying to work with churches, and a lot of we're getting good feedback from churches. So that's one thing. The other is, make those phone calls to your legislators. I mean, all the things you guys know very well how to do, but, pay attention and write letters to the editor or send emails and we'll have a lobby day and you'll hear about it and we hope you'll show up. So.
Well, we are hoping also to have a blue ribbon lobby day, to go down there. And we're also planning to have a session on lobbying, probably, I think it's in February. So we teach people how to lobby,
Yeah.
how to call, how to do all sorts of things. And so,
yeah, well, if there's anything we can do to help you with that, we certainly have a team a lot of real good, we have a great advocacy team, really do. So.
Okay.
Okay.
That's definitely in February, Carol.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, February.
Stay in touch. Okay. All right. Well, I really appreciate getting to talk to you guys and tell you our story and tell you how bad it is.
Sorry there's so few of us in person, but hopefully
Okay.
I'll be posting this tomorrow on our YouTube channel and getting that word out. So
Okay.
hopefully people will be watching.
That's great.
Does anybody have any more questions?
I guess everybody's got it all.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks again.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this, Terri.
Oh, thank you, Carol. I appreciate being invited. And next time I'm in
And
Dallas,
we'll
I'll
keep
give
you
you a
in
holler.
mind for assistance on our lobby presentation.
Yeah. Okay. Do. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.